should be like you, Mel.
Ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome back to Up the Cherries in all departments. And it is, of course, transfer show time. Apologies, we didn't do it on Friday. A couple of other things on my mind that day. But he's been good enough to change his schedule. Mr. Manny Thangaduri, how you doing, mate?
I'm okay. I've been better, but obviously there are other things that put things into perspective, and all I can say is that those glasses do make you look good. I should know.
I'll tell you what, Chris will probably be on later on, and he'll be comparing me to Paddy from Emmerdale, 100%. But at the same time, I think they're quite smooth. They're clear edges as well. I've got a pair of not red and black ones, blue and black ones. So of course, like our away kit. But I tell you what, gone with the clear ones today. Also, the blue and black ones are a little bit broken as well. Because
I'll tell you what, anyone's better than Smithy from Gavin and Stacey. Don't worry about that.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Well, it's always a pleasure to see you, mate. And thank you so much. Do hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell button. If you are new here, we will go through all of your comments as well, which we've got Malcolm Chiverton in. Good evening, Craig and Manny. Good evening, Malcolm. Hope you are doing well. No doubt it will get a little bit busier later on. We do have quite a few people across all sorts of different platforms at the moment. And of course, we are on Twitch. We're also going to be on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, all those sort of platforms as well. So pop over to the YouTube channel and you can get involved in the conversation as well. But I tell you what, let's start with something that is imminent, shall we, Manny?
Absolutely.
And it is this man. Ryan is flying to the UK for his Cherries medical. So this is the latest from Sky Sports News. Mark McAdam, of course, a very, very good friend of the channel and a top man as well. So Vasco da Gama winger Ryan is flying into the UK on Sunday ahead of his Bournemouth medical, which will take place on Monday. The agreed fee is 24.7 million with a potential 5.6 million in add-ons with no percentage of any future sale. Ryan has agreed personal terms and will sign a 5.5-year contract. The 19-year-old had offers from Russia, the Saudi Pro League, and other European clubs, but decided Bournemouth was the best choice for his development. Ryan has drawn comparisons back in Brazil to Endrick and Vinicius Junior. And I tell you what, this Manny is. I've seen a couple of highlights of him. I've seen what he can do. This is something I'm incredibly excited about because it's a lot of money for a 19-year-old, but this boy's going to be good. I think. I can't see him not being.
Oh, exactly. And, you know, that line over there, which says that he had offers from Russia, the Saudi Pro League, and other European clubs, but obviously deciding to come over to Dean Court. Couldn't agree more. I think you and I spoke about it last week when you said that when it comes to options for a player for player development, joining a club like Bournemouth, where he will be expected to get some games almost immediately, be thrown into the cauldron, as it were, will only really be good for him. And of course, Aston Villa recently signed a couple of teenagers as well, and we're going to be talking about them later on, Quo Vadis, as it were. But it's wonderful to see that a large number of these clubs, which wouldn't necessarily be considered big Premiership clubs, are willing to sign these youngsters and give them more chances to play. And I can tell you right now that had he joined, say, your Manchester Cities or your Arsenals or any other big club, he would, in all likelihood, have been asked to play some reserve team football or play with the youth team, maybe been loaned out a bit, and he wouldn't have necessarily gotten anywhere. But now he will have a chance to show how good he is, and people get a chance to see how good he is. Now, of course, he is Brazilian, so I'd like to think that he and Evan Nielsen will get on pretty well. I'm not too sure about his fluency with the English language.
Yeah.
So he might need to have Evan Nielsen or anyone else who speaks decent Portuguese help him out a little bit. But it seems to be a good signing, and we were talking earlier about him in streams gone by, and I think, he will enjoy playing with Bournemouth. But again, the big question is, with Bournemouth now out of both domestic cups, there's only really the league to play for. So I'm not too sure he may see too much action between now and the end of the season. It could very well be that, he might get a few games near the end. But I only hope that next season, once he really starts to blend in, he'll, be given more games. So maybe it's a question of timing for him. I'm not too sure.
Well, I'm just having a look at his stats. He is a winger, so I can only imagine that he is probably the replacement for Antoine Semenyo. So he's filling some very, very big boots.
Yes.
His actual record at Vasco da Gama is 74 appearances and 19 goals in those appearances. The first season, 2023, he scored one goal in 6 games. The second season, 1 goal in 24 games. It was 2025 where he really took off, 14 goals in 34 games. And I don't believe, and I might be wrong here, I don't believe the Brazilian league has kicked off for 2026 yet, because it seems to go by a calendar year. So he had a very, very good season last season, and it will be quite interesting to see what he's going to do. In the youth setup, at the under-17s level, in 2023, he scored 8 times in 14 games, and he scored 2 times in 11 games for the Brazil under-20s, where he currently sits. So I think he's quite an exciting signing, in all honesty. And I would like to see, I'd like to see him get quite a bit of game time. I think we've got to throw him in to the mix. Amin Adli has really started hitting the ground running now, which I was a little bit concerned about, to be perfectly honest. But I'm sure Rayan will get plenty of time. His father, I didn't realise this, it was actually a player for Vasco da Gama as well. He played as a defender between 95 and 2000. His name was Valkmar. So not a very Brazilian name, that is it? Valkmar? Sounds more normal.
Well, Well, I mean, you've got a Brazilian player by the name of Hulk, so you can't really
Very
complain
true.
there.
Yeah.
And yes, I've just got him right now. Valkmar da Silva Rocha, commonly known as Valkmar, a Brazilian former professional footballer who played for Vasco da Gama between 95 and 2000.
Yeah.
And he is, of course, Ryan's dad.
Yeah. Well, he is on his way. He is on a plane, potentially at this moment in time, on his way to Dean Court, and he will be, without a doubt, in the next 24 hours, an AFC Bournemouth player. And looking at what he's done in Brazil and what he's done in his very, very short career so far, he looks like an exciting player. Malcolm has said here, I hope he has a better attitude than Vinicius Jr. I don't know. To be honest, Vinicius Jr., I think he's had to put up with a lot at Real Madrid, in all honesty. Not so much in Real Madrid, but in other playing against other teams in Spain. But I do get where you're coming from. With there seems to be that spoilt side to Vinicius Junior as well, but the amount he's had to put up with as well. I feel a little bit sorry for him, don't you, Manny?
Yeah, it's funny because, I wouldn't say funny. That's not really the right term to use.
No.
When you take a look at these players who come from South America, many of them come from some areas which aren't exactly affluent, so to speak. In fact, more often than not, the more talented Brazilian footballers will probably come from the famous or rather notorious favelas, where affluence isn't exactly very common, and so they are more than less expected to be the breadwinners for their family. So it can be a struggle growing up in that environment. And so I suppose you can say that given how hard they've had to work and how much they've had to sacrifice to reach the top, they're probably, more inclined to have a little bit of an attitude at times. But as long as you sort of remember where they came from and you remember how good players they are and how much work they put in their game, you can sort of let it off a bit. And I suppose in the case of Ryan, instead of joining one of the bigger clubs where he'll be in the company of fellow multimillionaire talented footballers who may or may not be the best of influences for him, I think he's going to enjoy being at Bournemouth, playing with a bunch of solid professionals who will help him, get more adapted to the game while also keeping him grounded. And maybe they'll introduce him to the local cuisine. Some fish and chips at Harry Ramsden's, maybe. But, I have some hopes for this boy that he will develop. And the only thing that I have is that if he develops far too soon and ends up doing really well, he could end up being another Semenyo, courted by one of the bigger clubs. But certainly after this World Cup, if he plays well and continues to play very well, he can't not be included or considered by the next Brazilian manager for the following World Cup cycle, which will be in 2030, by which time I don't believe Ancelotti will still be the boss. But, I think there might be a lot to like about him, and we'll see how well he develops. And obviously, the environment at Bournemouth will be more to his liking, I would say. I don't think he's going to be... He'll be kept on the ground, so to speak.
Definitely. I do have a fear that, he could well be the next Dean Howson. He is here potentially for a short time. He does, from the footage I've seen, the flick from behind over his head to stick in the back of the top corner is sublime. Now, I don't expect him. I don't think the Brazilian league is that good a quality, Manny, but in all honesty, Brazilian players are great, but to be honest, one of the best teams ever in the world was a Brazilian team. But in all honesty, the league and the quality isn't up to the standard of the Premier League. But it's showing that real, sense of what he can do and where, what he can do in certain situations. He might have to get up to speed with the English game, but I would not be. I think he's probably going to be more of a player that hits the ground running like a Dean Howson. There is a few people, and I've seen this on social media this evening, saying to Mark McAdam, and I don't think Mark McAdam's got this knowledge. What is his release clause? I don't care. At the end of the day, there's no sell on in this deal. If he does hit the ground running and he does get picked up by a Barcelona or a Real Madrid in 2 or 3 years' time, but has done an outstanding job for AFC Bournemouth, and we sell him for 100 million, hey, at the end of the day, that's where we are. That's the situation we're in as a football team. And I think a lot of our fans have just got to be realistic where we kind of are in that food chain. That we're always gonna be a club where players will get picked up and bought because there is big fish, and we're not one of them. But we're doing very, very well in that pool. But there we are. That's my honest opinion. I know Malcolm's just put a couple of comments here. Looks a decent prospect and could be thrown in early as we are short of strikers. And he has said, why talk about him going before he has even joined us? I think he looks a great prospect, but we've just got to be realistic. There's a lot of people already turning around on social media saying, what's the release clause in his contract? At the end of the day, I don't care. It's a case of if he stays here for 3 seasons, does absolutely outstandingly well, and then ends up going to a Barcelona, Real Madrid for 100 million, then again, it's very, very good business. Wouldn't you agree, Manny?
Completely agree. Completely agree. The only thing I would say, which might be good for you, is that he will stay a little bit longer because, again, it will be interesting to see if he ends up being rewarded for his fine form with a Brazil call-up, because that will really only increase his value and his attractiveness, really, in the eyes of bigger clubs. So it'll remain to be seen, and there's still a lot of things to consider. But
100%.
I'm just eager to see how well he plays, obviously, and I will keep my eye on him. And I'll tell you what, especially after your brilliant result last night, you've got a quality manager on your hands, mate. Really, a quality manager and a team that just doesn't know when to quit. I love it,
mate. We'll talk about the game tomorrow. Of course, we got Cherry Slaps. Beaming from ear to ear. Nobody really expected that. 2-0 up again. Got pegged back, and then all of a sudden at the death, Amin Adli. I was a little bit worried about Amin Adli, I've got to be honest. In recent times, he's not looked. I didn't think at one point that he was going to actually make it here, but he's grown very, very quickly in such a short space of time from that position. And what a goal, what instinct to do that. It was probably harder than, it looked. It looked like it was a little bit of a tap-in, but he had to lift the ball over the goalkeeper. So, mate, very, very, very happy cherries here, mate. As you can imagine.
Yeah.
And that's a great segue, actually, into what we're going to talk about next, because Andoni Iraola said that he does want some new signings. I'm just going to read through this as well. So here we go. So Andoni Iraola says his Bournemouth players have been asking for new signings to boost the club's slim squad. We do have a slim squad, but we still beat Liverpool. The Cherries are particularly short of attacking options after selling top scorer Antoine Semenyo to Manchester City and losing forwards Justin Kluivert to a serious knee injury. Julio Soler, David Brooks, Enis Unal, and long-term absentees Tyler Adams and Ben Gannon-Doak also missed Monday evening's 1-1 draw at Brighton, while goal scorer Marcus Tavernier was forced off by a hamstring issue. Iraola, whose club confirmed the arrival of midfielder Alex Toff. I don't know why there's a load of symbols in there, but wherever we got this from, there's lots of symbols. From I'm going to Ferin Cabos.
No, listen, mate, I've got you there. First of all, I've got the team. It's Ferencvaros, and I've also learned that the pronunciation of his surname is actually Tort, as in Bournemouth taught Liverpool a footballing lesson. So it's Alex Tort.
See,
Fourth.
I love that, Manny. I absolutely love that. So Alex Tort from the Hungarian side on Tuesday morning. I'm not going to try it again. Sorry, Manny. Said, we are in a very, very delicate situation. You could see the bench at Brighton. We had 4 young players and 3 defenders. We are demanding the same players to play every game, every minute. We cannot ask more of these players we have available right now. They're giving us everything, but we definitely need help. I think that's very clear. The club is working on it. As a manager, you want the players for the 1st of January, but I understand it's not easy to sign players, especially in this winter market. The players you have sometimes don't want new signings because they can play less. And at this moment, they are even asking, we need someone to help, otherwise it's going to be difficult. And so it proved against Brighton. In all honesty, I do think, that kind of showed. It didn't show, of course, last night, but, against Brighton, we were on very, very slim pickings. And you looked at the Brighton bench and you kind of envied them a little bit. And you thought, But yeah, it's good that he has picked out that we need to do something, get more players in, isn't it, Manny?
Absolutely, and of course, as we all know, Bournemouth aren't really the only team that's having some issues with their squad. It's really sad to hear of some of the players that you've listed who are injured. I told you I really like Justin Kluivert a great deal, but Tyler Adams and Ben Gannon-Doak are particularly big losses for their national teams with the World Cup on the horizon. Ben Gannon-Doak in particular has been very impressive in Scotland's successful qualification attempt for the World Cup, and hopefully, I think Steve Clarke will be sweating on his fitness and hoping that he will turn out all right. But it is clear that the squad is now being a little bit stretched, and obviously one thing which made it apparent, was that with Alan Smith coming back into the starting lineup against the Reds, Alex Jimenez was sort of deployed as more of a winger, an auxiliary winger, and he actually didn't do a very bad job, scoring a goal as well. But then when you have a situation where your squad is a little bit thin, the gymnastics that managers have to play, and even if you were to get some results, it would be quite impressive. But again, it just makes it all the more difficult. And with there only being, say, a few days before the window gets shut, I believe it will be getting shut this coming Friday on the 31st, right?
It's the 2nd of February.
Oh, so it's a Sunday, huh?
Yeah.
So there is still some time. Yeah. There is still some time. So obviously some new players will be needed, or else, you somehow manage to look at the recovery time of certain other players and hope that they will be back a little bit more quickly than expected. So one thing which I really liked about what was said was that instead of the players, not really being eager to have people coming in because it means their playing time might invariably get shortened, they're actually saying, no, we need some new players to help us out. And that's how you should be as a squad. Even if you don't get too many games, you just know that you're going to have some roles to play. And you've got to also take your hat off to Adam Smith. I know he's club captain. I know that obviously with Jimenez and company doing well, he hasn't exactly been able to force his way back into the team, but he got back in and has proven, that it's a squad game and everyone, you're in this together. And you take a look at a side like Aston Villa, who we'll obviously talk about much later. I keep repeating that. They're also pretty much showing the same sort of quality. And when you have that level of squad unity and it's reflected in your performances, that's what makes teams like Bournemouth and Aston Villa wonderful to watch. And I know that when you come up against them later on in the league at Vitality, I think revenge will be on your mind. But either way, it's going to be a wonderful match. I only hope that you solve the problem ASAP, and also that some of the injured players do get back fit and playing ASAP, because if some of those players in question were to miss out on playing in the World Cup, I think it would be an absolute disaster for them.
100%. 100%. Good evening as well to James from Talk Fan TV. Hope you're doing well, mate. And fantastic done. I think that is. So yes, absolutely fantastic game yesterday, of course, against Liverpool, 3-2, just at the death. Of course, Jimenez, you mentioned there as well, Manny. What a performance by him. What a goal. So yeah, I think he's coming on leaps and bounds. But I'll tell you what, let's move away from ourselves for a moment and let's talk about Nottingham Forest, a side whose fans aren't very pleased with me this year because I did predict them to go down. I'm still going to say this, that West Ham seem to have a resurgence and Nottingham Forest definitely in danger. Although they did get a good result today, and they are looking to bring in, well, they've got a loan move here in Lucca. So Lorenzo Lucca has completed his initial loan move to Nottingham Forest from Napoli. An agreement between the club also contains a 34.8 million option to buy the striker. What do you make of this guy?
Well, I mean, from what I can gather, he's 6'7", so he's as tall as Nick Voltemade, also the same height as a certain Peter Crouch. I only hope that he will prove to be a much better footballer than the former England international, of course, who, if memory serves me right, played for both Southampton and Portsmouth, but not Bournemouth. Yeah. So that should make him persona non grata for Cherries fans. But it's a bit disappointing for him that he's being asked to move away from a Napoli side that are competing heavily for the Serie A title. Yeah. I'm just going to try and find out some more information on him, but obviously,
he's a journeyman, to be perfectly honest. In his short career, he's only 25 years old. He played 16 times and scored 1 goal for Napoli. Earlier on this season, he's then signed permanently and then gone on loan to Nottingham Forest. So, it's an interesting. He's got a very, very interesting career so far. Udinese, where he's played the majority of his games over a loan spell and then a permanent spell, looks to be actually where he's found his best form. But Udinese then let him go on loan to Napoli, who then signed him permanently, and then Napoli have sent him on loan to Nottingham Forest. So was it a case that Napoli had an agreement in place, then, decided, just looking at it, they did have an obligation to buy, and then they've loaned him to Forest. So it's a very, very, very strange situation. He's not the most prolific of strikers as well, by the looks of things, but he is, like you say, a very, very, very tall striker. 6'7" is towering over me.
Yeah, and he towers over most people, of course. And obviously, Forest have been in need of a striking option ever since Chris Wood had that injury, and they have, in the meantime, tried to adapt with Taiwo Awoniyi coming back into the lineup. And obviously today, they set things partially right with a good win over Brentford, but you get the feeling that they still need a bit of a striking option. And obviously with Newcastle having signed Nick Voltemade at the beginning of the season based on his exploits with Germany's youth teams, it's this idea that a 6'7" striker who towers over almost all, I think he's taller than all of the goalkeepers in the Premier League. I know that Emi Martinez is 6'5". I can't think of any other goalkeeper who might be as tall, except maybe your own backup, Fraser Forster. We'll talk about him later too. But there's this thing about strikers as well, that if you are tall, you are supposed to be, a really good target man. But 6'7", I just don't know if if a career can necessarily be sustainable unless you really have the ability to move very well and make sure you're in the right place at the right time, unless you have the ability to dominate. And I think a lot of teams this season especially see scoring from corners as a really good weapon, especially if you could put some pressure on the goalkeeper and not allow him to really, come for the ball and try to dominate as often. Some of these tall strikers can be a bit of they can add an advantage. And as you said, Craig, he's not very prolific, but at Udinese he showed that he definitely can score a few goals, and he's still, at 25, he's still got some good years in the game, and he is also, of course, a full Italian international, although he hasn't really been picked in recent times. I would say that there is still some time for him to develop, and as you mentioned as well, this type of gymnastics with players, no sooner do you sign the player permanently that you loan him out to another club with an option to buy. And I'm just glad that they included an option rather than an obligation, because I'm not too sure that Forest would necessarily have wanted to splash the cash on him unless they were to consider him to be someone who'd really improve their side and be a huge improvement over Chris Wood or even Taiwo Awoniyi. But it will be interesting to see how well he does. And, Forest are in trouble, but then so are West Ham, so are Burnley. And no team in that bottom 5 or bottom 6 can call themselves safe as of yet. So any help that Forest can get, I think they seem to have a good signing. And Forest are also out of all competitions with only the league to play for. So it could very well be that once he proves his match fitness, he will come right in, and then we'll see how well he does.
It's a very, very tight Premier League this year. And to be honest, after West Ham's win yesterday, even though we did get an absolutely outstanding victory against Liverpool, I don't feel comfortable. I think this season, it might actually be one of those seasons where you need more than the 38 points to stay up. And I'm sure that Sean Dyche has acknowledged this, and he is a target man, and he is a sort of Dyche player. Of course, Forest having that option means if Dyche isn't at Forest at the end of the season, let's be honest, Forest have got fluidity in their making decisions with their managers. Then he might, if he is a Dyche player, he might not be a player for the next manager. So it's an interesting one. It's a very, very interesting one. But there we are. That's Lorenzo Lucca. And he has signed for Nottingham Forest on loan with an option to buy. But let's have a look at a player who is heading to Spurs by the looks of things. And that is Robertson. He sees his future at Spurs, but Slot wants him to stay as he needs all of his players. So this is an interesting one. Most definitely Spurs needs players, let's be perfectly honest, Manny. And they're in a right state. You might, as an Arsenal fan, you're probably enjoying this, to be perfectly honest. But yeah, Spurs are not doing very, very well. They look very, very lost. Thomas Frank, I think he's under a hell of a lot of pressure. He's probably thinking or wishing he probably stayed at Brentford, where he was doing an outstanding job, was very, very comfortable. It's again one of these situations where you take over a big club and that ship takes a lot longer to turn around. They weren't in great shape beforehand. They'd won a European trophy. It looked like Thomas Frank, when he first went in there, was going to do a really good job, but he's not found it easy. But this is the sort of move I think that will shore things up for Spurs if it happens. But is it going to happen?
Well, I can confirm right now, based on news outlets, that it won't happen in the January window. And it's very interesting as well, because you have a subplot, of course, that Milos Kerkez, who, of course, was a cherry, ever since he joined Liverpool, he's pretty much become the first choice left back. And after a very difficult start, he seems to have settled in. And the consensus, of course, was that Andy Robertson had started to lose a little bit of pace, especially with, some very pacey right wingers being able to skin him alive. Now, for what it's worth, he is still Scotland captain. And along with Kieran Tierney, he's one of Steve Clarke's two best options at left back. So he normally plays the wider role with Kieran Tierney tucking in the back five, or he can start and then be replaced by Tierney, of course. Now, Kirkes, if you will recall, with great satisfaction, was actually cooked last night in that first half with Alex Jimenez driving him potty and actually leaving him for dead when he scored that goal. And so Slot had no option but to make a glut of substitutions, including bringing off his big signing from Bournemouth and replacing him with Scotland's captain, who probably didn't do too badly. But now there is an idea that with all of his players needed and with the lack of defensive options, especially with Joe Gomez having been forced off with an injury during Evan Nilsson's goal, there's no way that he can allow Andrew Robertson to leave, especially since Joe Gomez has normally been used as a utility defender, playing at centre-back and left-back, although I will maintain that right-back is where he belongs. There's nobody else who can really occupy that left-back position. And even if they decide to recall Kostas Tsimikas from Roma, it just wouldn't really be quite the same. And Robertson still has a lot more to offer at this stage, because Liverpool probably won't win the league, but they are still in contention for the Champions League and maybe the FA Cup. And there's no way that that Liverpool can afford to lose him. He's Scotland's captain. He's not going to be left back, pun intended, in Glasgow while the team goes over to the Americas to play. So he just needs to keep himself fresh and fit, and he will be in the squad. There's no way he can be dropped. But obviously he wants to play regularly, and I think at the end of the season, after some analysis, he probably will be allowed to leave, and he will join the likes of Ray Clements and Jamie Redknapp, Lord rest Ray Clements' soul, of course, in joining Spurs from Liverpool. But for now, Robbo's staying put. Liverpool fans are happy, and I'm sure he will definitely have a big role to play between now and the end of the season.
He's that little bit of experience, I think, that they need. Especially after last night and after watching them, there's that little bit of experience which they kind of need just to get them, back on track and get them moving forwards again, Liverpool. I don't think they, I'm going to turn around and say this now. I don't think they were terrible last night. I don't think Liverpool were terrible at all. A lot of people are making out that they're terrible, but that does Bournemouth discredit, in all honesty, because I think personally that we played so well. We played with some real guile, real strength. We was very, very clever in what we did. Jordi Petrovic, of course, for every mistake that, a lot of people were mentioning about and jumping up and down about, he was very, very good. So, yes, I think you've got to give Liverpool a bit of credit as well as giving us a lot more credit. But in all honesty, Andy Robertson is somebody I think that they need, in all honesty, just to keep them steady, and then maybe at the end of the season, allow him to go to wherever. But yeah, it's not going to happen in this window. So there we go. That's my honest opinion, and I think that's shared by yourself as well, Manny, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I completely agree as well that Bournemouth deserve a lot more credit for the way you performed, and I will sort of divulge on that on a later date. I don't want to take too much time. I think Liverpool, in many ways, they looked a little bit solid, but just weren't really able to find that kind of cutting edge. And a word on Petrovic as well, and we might talk about him as well a little bit later. That save from Florian Wirtz, which erroneously was rewarded with a goal kick when it should have been a corner. How crucial was that? Had Wirtz scored, it would have been 3-2, and, you would have been staring down the barrel of a really disheartening defeat. But every single, block, every single save, everything, just contributed. And I thought defensively, you were really, really on it. It was really from the set pieces that Liverpool scored both of those goals.
I've got to admit, it was a corner. I think it was quite clear to see. But hey, the referee got it wrong. We'll take it. That's great. once in
Take
a
it
while.
and run, mate. Take it and run. Take it and run.
Exactly.
Jeff Hurst will definitely agree. Sir Jeff Hurst, that is.
Yeah. Just very quickly as well. Join us at 7:30 Monday, the 2nd of February. 30 minutes after the transfer window shuts, as myself, Manny, and Matt will react to the winter transfer window. And the link is on the screen. I don't expect you to type that. You can find it on the YouTube channel, though. And then, yeah, can watch that on the 2nd of February. So it's the Monday that the transfer window slams shut. It's the 2nd of Monday? To be honest, I've kind of lost track of all days. Oh, yes, it is Monday. So there we are.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I didn't realise. Yeah, it's good that Matt's on the ball because I most definitely ain't. I tell you what, let's talk about a player who was heavily linked from your club, Manny, Arsenal, but he has gone elsewhere, and that is Ethan Nwaneri. He has joined Marseille on loan, and he's netted on his debut as well. So, Arsenal midfielder Ethan Nwaneri has joined French club Marseille on loan for the remainder of the season. The 18-year-old has made 12 appearances for the Gunners in all competitions this season, starting 4 games, but none in the Premier League, and scored once in the Carabao Cup. Nwaneri signed a new contract in the summer until 2030, but has found his route into the first team, challenged by the summer signings of Noni Madueke for 48.5 million and Erebeshi Eze for 67 million. BBC Sport previously reported he was not expected to go on loan this season, with the original feeling from both the club and the player being that he would benefit more by being part of the squad, which is challenging for trophies. However, the prospect of playing football in another league and country whilst also getting regular game time has prompted the England under-21 international to make the move. Now, where he scored on his Marseille debut as the League One side beat Lens at 3-1 at home. So, yes. What do you make of his move to France? Because we've said a couple of times, because of course we are linked with Lorient. Bill Foley has got a 25% stake in that football club. It was where Krupi come from. It isn't, and I'm going to say this now, and sorry to any French fans listening, it's not the best league. I think that's quite clear. But going to Marseille actually does open up some opportunities. What do you make of his move there?
Well, he's gone to a club which are challenging quite seriously for Liga, and that win over Lens, of course, is a significant one because Marseille were third, but they beat the second-place team. And before Nwaneri's arrival, Craig, they had started to fall off a bit in the league. They also were thrashed by Liverpool recently in the Champions League, although I don't think De Zerbi really set the team up properly that night. But, they are a team that are looking to challenge for silverware. And if Marseille do manage to make the knockout stages of the Champions League via the playoffs, then Nwaneri will, of course, get to play some Champions League games because, unlike in the Premiership, there is no rule which prevents loan players from playing for another club. So you're not cup-tied in that respect. And that was how the likes of Marco Asensio was able to play for Aston Villa, having joined from PSG on loan last season.
Yeah.
And, of course, he gets to play with an Arsenal legend in the form of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who I still miss greatly, and I don't need to, expand on that. And the more he plays, the better he's going to get. The thing that makes me really angry is that, it's mentioned there that he's had his route to the first team not so much challenged, but blocked by Noni Madueke and Ebery Eze. Eze is a quality player. He is much better suited to be playing in that central number 10 position. Not necessarily as a second striker in the 4-4-2, but in the 4-2-3-1, he's the attacking midfielder who, dictates the play, adds some urgency and adds some bite. So he wouldn't really have a problem there competing with him, with Ethan. But there's a reason why I refer to the former Chelsea winger as No Madueke, because he runs very well, but he doesn't really have that much in terms of end product. Can't even whip in the cross for Toppy. And a big stat, a very alarming stat, is that Madueke has been now without a Premier League goal for 365 calendar days. One whole year. Put that into perspective. So when you have a situation where you have a young talent who, if given the freedom to play and if given the confidence of regular minutes can be trusted to do quite well, if you see someone playing over him who doesn't really lend that much more, but who was acquired having, we had to spend almost a king's ransom to get him, somewhere in the region of nearly 50 million quid, as was mentioned, it is really disheartening. Now, of course, there is a precedent in that a certain William Saliba was sent back to France on loan to play some games, and he came back to Arsenal a much improved player. And now, he's very much one of Arteta's undroppables. If he's fit, he's one of the first names on the team sheet. So hopefully it could very well be that Nwaneri develops well at Marseille, earns some success, and then Arsenal can see it fit to use him for later games. But, we have to be very careful with promising players like him because, if it could very well be that Marseille enjoy having him so much and they really like him and they really feel as though they can kick on with him, they may decide to say, what, we want to buy him from you permanently. You can name your price, make it reasonable.
Yeah.
But again, there will be some flux around Marseille with Roberto De Zerbi also being linked with moves elsewhere. We don't know if some of their better players will stay at the club beyond this season. So a lot can happen. But for now, I'm looking forward to seeing how well Nwaneri does. I really do hope he smashes it. And if he does manage to play in the Champions League knockout stages, assuming Marseille end up qualifying, then I think that will be a wonderful platform for him to shine. He could possibly win La Liga, I should say, and end the hegemony of PSG. So, it's a promising and exciting move, and I couldn't be happier for him. And had he joined Bournemouth, mind you, on loan, he wouldn't have been eligible to play for you lot. But at least when it comes to Marseille, there are no such restrictions. And I think it's also fair to say that Arteta wasn't willing to let him go to a Premiership rival. So it's worked out quite well for him, I'd like to think.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. That does make sense. To be honest, it's a shame that we didn't bring him in. I do like him as a footballer. I think he would have done a great job here. But he has got an opportunity in Marseille to potentially win the French league. He's got the potential of playing in the knockout phase. Marseille are 19th in the new look Champions League. They have got their final game against Club Bruges. However, they cannot take any, they can't take their feet off the pedal because you look at the teams chasing them. Yeah, the likes of Napoli, Benfica are down there, Ajax, and there's also some surprise packages as well. In the likes of Bodo Glimt, who of course beat Manchester City, and Cypriot team Paphos, who, to be honest, gave Chelsea a little bit of a scare at the times as well. So, in all honesty, Ethan Nwaneri, is going to have to put in a real shift. I'm guessing he's going to be eligible for that Champions League game, get Marseille into knockout stages, and then who knows what happens. But it will give him quite a good experience, which I'm sure Arsenal next season will benefit from. If he doesn't make it there, then it might be a case of, he will leave the club, and maybe then we can go in for Nwaneri. But it does make sense from my perspective, from the perspective of Arsenal. Sorry, mate. As you were going to say.
Yeah, I was just saying right now, I don't know if he will be thrown in because there might be some issues about whether or not he can actually play in that preliminary league stage for two different teams. But he should be available for the knockouts, assuming Marseille do qualify. And I think I will include the playoffs in that. And as things stand, Marseille are, as you mentioned, in 19th on 9 points, and Club Brugge, their final opponents, are on 7 points. So that's a game which I would expect them to win. And if they win, they seal their spot in the playoffs, the knockout playoffs. And, you know, there are some other teams below them, of course, who will be looking to try and overtake them. But for Marseille, that game against Bruges will be must win. And I think they will be going all out for that. But as you've said, it was interesting to hear you say that maybe after that loan spell, he could end up being a wonderful target for some big teams. And, you know, we might just have to, you know, put up with it and say that's just another talented young player we allowed to leave. And so, you know, he could end up achieving more things away from Arsenal. And it will break my heart. But, you know, that's the way it is, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But there we are. That's Ethan Nwaneri. He has gone to Marseille on loan. I told you he was going to be around. It is Chris from Leicester Till I Die, of course. Fresh from Marty Cifuentes sacking. He said, "Hello, Paddy and Manny." Yeah, I've even got the glasses on today. I've got bloodshot eyes. That's why. Still trusting the process, Manny. Yeah, I think he's talking about today's game against Manchester.
Chris, sir, if you must know, I lost trust in the process several years back. And so I'm not the one to whom you should be asking that question. But this is what you get with Arsenal. Just when you think that we've got it made, something will happen. There's a part of me that thinks that maybe Arteta just loves the drama a little bit too much. But all we can do is just hope that we get our act together against Leeds at Ellen Road. And if it is true that Cifuentes has now said adios, hopefully you'll get a good interim until the end of the season. And maybe Leicester can climb back up again.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. I think Leicester are 14th. They are 6 points off the playoffs, I understand at this point in time. But let's be honest, they are a big side, and they shouldn't really be in that position. I'm probably preaching there to the converted there, Chris. If you're still watching, Leicester should be competing for automatic promotion back to the Premier League. And the fact they're not, and this is not due to any points deductions or anything like that, which I don't think he should get. Yeah, thank God he's gone. Chris has said. To be honest, I think personally, Leicester should be competing for automatic promotion from the Championship. The fact that even without points deductions or anything like that, that they're not is a little bit disappointing. Let's be fair. Of course, beaten yesterday by Oxford United. I think it was at the King Power Stadium as well, just to make matters worse. Chris has said, if we don't want to go up this season, we would come straight back down, or worse than under Ruud van Nistelrooy. Well, it depends who you get in charge. Gary O'Neill, I think he'd keep you up. He'd keep you up, Chris. But I'll tell you what, less of Leicester. Let's talk about Paqueta. And Flamengo hold Paqueta talks with West Ham deal said to be worth up to 35 million, with 5 million in add-ons. Paqueta, it's shown he's not really been happy for quite some time. Flamengo, of course, the Brazilian top flight team. They did win the league last season. And to be fair, they're a very, very, very good side in Brazil. This is probably a massive risk for them, considering how how much money it is in that league. Like I say, it is a league that is not really at the sort of level. The Brazilian players are amazing. Don't get me wrong with that, but it's not up to the level. And he is 28 years old. So he's probably hitting his prime, but Can you see? Do you think there's any truth in this?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there is. Look, Flamengo aren't actually a bad team. They are, of course, a
No.
Brazilian powerhouse team who not too long ago won the Copa Libertadores, which is the South American equivalent of the UEFA Champions League. And huge congratulations to Jorginho, former Arsenal midfielder, who
Yes.
ended up winning that competition as well, and ended up joining a list of several illustrious players, including one of his current teammates in winning both the UCL and the Copa Libertadores. The only problem is the Brazilian league has maybe one or two real standout clubs, and the rest are, honest clubs who will really, really fight hard and also try and make names for themselves. But they don't really achieve as consistent success as you'd like them to. So, in all honesty, this would feel like a deal that would suit him very well, because it's quite clear that the man is not happy at West Ham. There is still a big chance that they could end up, going down, despite their brilliant win over Sunderland. I know you said that they do have the bit between their teeth of late, but there are still some issues with the team, and I'd still back any top team to, withstand them and really just, end up beating them at the end. And this could be a move that's good for him. I'm a little bit surprised that no top European club has come in for him, because you think that at 28 years old, there would be some clubs coming in for him. But if Flamengo want to bring him home, then it could work out well for him and his family. If he hasn't really settled in England, he might enjoy going back to play in Brazil. And obviously, that keeps him in contention for a World Cup spot, depending, of course, if that will happen now in this window. If it doesn't happen, then he'll probably end up staying at West Ham until the end of the season, and then he can be offered to whichever club he might possibly like. I'm not going to rubbish this. I'm not really going to approve of this, so to speak. But I'm just saying that this is one which doesn't necessarily surprise me. And if it happens, which I don't think it will, because I don't think Nuno wants to lose any of his players, then, good luck to him. I'm sure he'll smash it. And as you mentioned, Craig, it's a calendar year season in Brazil and also in the north and south of the Americas. So that could actually, he could invariably end up joining the club right in time for the start of the season. So he won't necessarily be short of match fitness, I'd like to think.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, like you say, I think it makes sense that he is going to be leaving West Ham. I just wonder about the destination, but there we are. That is the latest rumour with regards to Paqueta. Will he go back to his native Brazil? We shall soon find out. But there we go. Manny, Chris has turned around and said this to our Gary O'Neill suggestion. If you are listening, Chris has said a rude word, and it's then followed by off. So I don't think he's too keen about Gary O'Neill. However, I've got one better for Chris as well. I think he has disappeared because he's put this laughing faces and then see you later. Take care, both. Hope see you later, mate. And yeah, I will catch up with you.
I'm just glad he's not too angry, because you never want to make him angry. It was just probably said in jest more than anything else.
But if they are looking for a manager to maybe take over who has got all the skills, all the qualifications to actually get them moving, I don't know if really moving is the right word. Paul Groves is currently at Indian Super League club North East United as an assistant manager. So maybe, just maybe, Paul Groves will want to go back into football and management with Leicester City. There we go. There's a recommendation. If you're a Leicester fan watching, I would not recommend it in the slightest. You probably remember Paul Groves, don't you?
I'm just taking. I mean, I can't necessarily say that I have seen him manage, and that little Indian link there was very interesting indeed.
I have to be
Yes.
perfectly honest.
Yes.
Yes, it was quite horrific to be fair, and then Eddie Howe come back and then took that side on. What was? I'm just thinking actually. No, hang on. I'm getting all my timelines incorrect here. I'm getting all. Um, yeah. He was. Yeah. He was. Let's put nicely. He was bloody awful. Yes, he did actually. Yeah, he actually come in, and then Eddie Howe took over from Paul Groves. Sorry, it's late. It's late. Um,
Yeah. And he
yes,
was
and then
also
the
a
rest
player
is
at Leicester.
history.
Yes, he was a player at Leicester City as well for 2 seasons. So I'm not too sure Chris will have many good memories of him as a player either. So, mate, you're supposed to be helping him by giving him some concrete options.
I'll tell you what, he might be quite keen to have Paul Groves back at Leicester City. There you go. All right, moving swiftly on. Let's talk about transfers rather than winding Chris up. And let's go back to ourselves because One Football has said Lazio want obligation in Bournemouth move for Mandas. According to reports in Italy, Bournemouth have stepped up their pursuit of the Greek goalkeeper and have already presented a concrete proposal to Lazio. The Cherries are working on a loan deal that would include a purchase option valued between 20 million and 22 million euros, underlying how highly they rate the Greek shot stopper. Is this really the competition that Petrovic needs then, Manny? Because of course Fraser Forster's joined the club. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to be honest now. I think that this sounds, this is from One Football. I think this sounds a little bit like, don't get me wrong. He seems to, have quite a good track record with Greece, going from the under 16s all the way to the national team. But then again, we've got Alex Poulsen, we've got Fraser Forster. I think this would be a little bit of a, knock for him. Or well, knock for Forster. What do you make of this? Is this really the move? That is this the right move to put Jordi Petrovic under pressure? I thought he was good yesterday.
Well, I mean, I'm just taking a look at this chap, Christos Mandas, right now. He's been capped twice for Greece, the full senior team. And ever since joining Lazio, he's only made a total of 33 appearances, as you've mentioned, 18 in the league. But, he's hardly played at all this season. And that's another reason why, he's pretty much on the move. I think he's only made one appearance in the Coppa Italia. So that takes his total from 32 over 2 seasons to 33 over 3. And it is rather puzzling because given that you've already signed Forster on loan and will certainly have some other players who... Yeah, I think Will Dennis is still at the club, as is now Forster.
Yeah.
I think maybe in Forster's case, there's probably this idea that Forster is 37, maybe coming to something like the end of his career, which I hope won't be the case. I'd like to think he can play for at least 1 or 2 more seasons. Yeah. But maybe, pardon me. Oh, please excuse me.
No, that's all right, Manny. No problem at all.
Good. Maybe it's maybe the consensus is that Forster isn't really a long-term option. But then if he isn't a long-term option, why would you sign him and then sign another goalkeeper on loan? Is he going to end up being just another Darren Randolph who is on the books at the club but doesn't play a single game, doesn't get picked for a single squad? To me, that doesn't really make any sense. And someone like Mandas as well, who hasn't played much football this year, who hasn't really been given an opportunity, maybe due to an injury or something, this is going to be a really big gamble for him. And you know, there's this report from BBC which says that the value of the clause is expected to be under £21 million. It'll be difficult to trigger, and there'll be a conditional obligation to buy. But then, assuming that Petrovic continues to play, regardless of whoever is his backup, whether it's Forster or Mandas or even Will Dennis, maybe, I just don't know if this would necessarily be the right move to make. And
No.
I just don't really. I don't like this, to be honest with you. I really don't like this.
No. Alex Crook has also reported it. He reported it on the 19th of January. And then Fabrizio Romano has also mentioned it yesterday. So it's a €3 million loan fee that he's mentioned, €18 million buy option to become mandatory based on appearances. Yeah, it worries me because at the end of the day, I think Jordi Petrovic did okay yesterday. I think, what he did, he looked comfortable, he looked confident. We've got to kind of give him time, but we've also got Alex Paulson, Will Dennis. Will Dennis is a good goalkeeper, but he's not going to get his game time. If Mandas comes in, we've got Fraser Forster, who's no doubt just here for the end of the season, who's not going to probably get a game, who I think is adequate enough backup. If there is a drop in form by Jordi Petrovic, Fraser Forster can jump in. Will Dennis has been, number 2 for most of the season. It just doesn't sit right with me. I think there's other priorities that maybe need to be looked at than this.
Exactly. And you mentioned the New Zealander Paulson. I think he is on loan at a Polish club, Lechia Gdańsk, until the end of the season. If the worst comes to worst, maybe you could recall him if things get really bad, but I don't see you doing that. And
yeah,
I just, in fact, Paulson already not long after joining Bournemouth was actually loaned back to a New Zealand club. It was Auckland FC, and now he's gone on the second loan deal. So I'm not too sure what sort of gymnastics are being applied here, but I don't like the Mandas move, mate. I think with Forster, you've got a very experienced deputy. I just wonder if Fraser will be at the club beyond this season. Or whether any opportunities will be given to play. But, as well as Petrovic did against Liverpool, he still does have a few inconsistencies to his game. So I'd like to think that maybe there'll be 1 or 2 games where he might be dropped near the end of the season. But you've signed a perfectly capable backup in Fraser Forster. I'm not too sure what this deal for Mandas will, how it'll benefit you, to be honest.
Agree. I think this, I think there's probably something happening because Fabrizio Romano and Alex Crook don't really normally get things wrong. Hey, we might be completely wrong, but it doesn't sit well with me because I'd like to see Alex Paulson. I'd like to see Will Dennis. I'd like to see, Fraser Forster is capable of coming in. Jordi Petrovic. It's kind of putting a real cloud over him after such a good display against Liverpool. Yeah, it just doesn't sit well for me. But there we go. Let's talk about another player that AFC Bournemouth are meant to be linked with. But there is a caveat to this. So Bournemouth had 30 million AFC Bournemouth deal could be good news for Stoke City. So Bournemouth had previously been linked with a move for Stoke City's Sorba Thomas earlier in the window, but that move appears now to be in doubt following the Cherries' move for Vasco da Gama Brazilian winger Rayam. As per the Daily Mail, Stoke winger Sorba Thomas was subject of a rumoured move to the Premier League outfit earlier this January. The Cherries succumbed to losing Antoine Semenyo to Manchester City after the Ghanaians, sorry, I've completely lost my word in there, haven't I? Release clause was paid by Pep Guardiola's side, leaving the club short in forward areas. Thomas was apparently on the short list of potential replacements for Semenyo, though that move now appears to be dead in the water following Bournemouth's move for the Vasco da Gama winger. According to Alex Crook via X, Bournemouth agreed a deal in principle for the Brazilian worth around £30 million, which will come as music to the ears of Potter's fans, whose hope of keeping Thomas in Staffordshire beyond the winter window have taken a massive boost. So are the Cherries right to go with an up-and-coming prospect rather than Sorba Thomas? I'll be honest, I don't think really Sorba Thomas was going to come here anyway. He is 27-year-old. Don't get me wrong. He's done all right for Stoke, but I think this is the first time, Manny, that we can safely use something, and we're just going over to somebody who has popped into the room.
Bullshit.
What do you reckon, Manny?
Yeah, I'm going to say this about Sorba. I've heard of him a few years ago, obviously. A Welsh international, of course, and a part of their World Cup squad back in 2022 under Robert Page. And he made his name actually at Huddersfield Town when he was a part of that team, which was sort of fighting, I think, to stay in the Championship, but ended up getting, relegated to League One. And quite a few fans over there, mind you, were not necessarily happy with, his attitude and the way he conducted himself at times, kind of considered himself a bit of a big-time Charlie in some respects. There's no doubt that he's done well, obviously earning caps for Wales and doing as well as he can, but you get the feeling that with a guy like him, he's now at the age of 27, and for a winger, he doesn't score too many goals. He actually was sent out on loan while at Huddersfield. He was sent out on loan to Blackburn Rovers, where he had a period there and played. Also had a period playing in Liga with Nantes before coming back. He scored 9 league goals in 29 league appearances for Stoke City, and so I would say more than anything else that he's a guy who has some ability, but he's definitely not going to be uprooting trees. And would you really want to sign a guy like him at the expense of an up-and-coming youngster who really has a higher ceiling, as it were? So I think Thomas is the sort of person who might be happy, just playing at a championship level, doing whatever he can to keep his place in the Wales national team, and just, pottering on, pun intended, because Stoke City, of course, are the Potters. So I would go so far to say that you probably dodged a bullet. No disrespect to the bloke, because he is a decent player, but would you really pay that much money to sign him ahead of an up-and-coming youngster? I don't think so.
No, most definitely not. So there we are. That is what I call
bullshit.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks.
Yeah.
He was. Does it? I need to get a new one, though.
Yeah, you might. The sooner you get a new one, the better. Try and have one every week. But I didn't see you paying that much money for him anyway. And when you consider the scouting reports on him and you analyze him, you can say that he has some ability, but maybe wouldn't have been worth a punt. Mind you, it could very well be that he joins a team that gets promoted to the Premiership next season if he decides to leave Stoke City. But we'll see what happens with that. But don't lose any sleep over not getting him. Not worth it.
Most definitely not. Well, let's talk about somebody who's potentially going to leave Manchester United, and this is Casemiro. Casemiro will leave Manchester United this summer upon the expiry of his contract. The legendary midfielder has enjoyed 4 seasons at the club, playing 146 games and scoring 21 goals to date. A serial winner, Casemiro was unveiled at Old Trafford in August 2022 and quickly became a fan favourite due to his combative nature and his ability to score goals at crucial times. The Brazil captain played a major role in helping United win the 2023 Carabao Cup, scoring a header in a colossal performance against Newcastle United. The 33-year-old also won the Emirates FA Cup in 2024. But who is on United's radar to replace Casemiro. There's one player that I wish wasn't on their radar. Of course, he is injured for AFC Bournemouth at the moment. But there's Adam Wharton and Carlos Baleba also there. Now, the problem is Manchester United are starting to pick up. Sorry, Manny, as you know, today, under Michael Carrick, they seem to be doing things. That's not necessarily a bad thing for us because, of course, Andoni Iraola was, being mentioned in a lot of articles. But I can't. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think they would go for Tyler Adams. I hope not. Anyway.
I think the fact that Tyler's injured will probably, cool their interest in him, and
Yeah.
it will remain to be seen if he, recovers quickly enough. But then, if he recovers, I expect him to play a role for Mauricio Pochettino's USA team. As far as Baleba is concerned, in the words of the song, I think it's fair to say that the person in charge of scouting at Manchester United is a believer once he's seen him play.
Yeah.
Not a trace of doubt in his mind. Enough's enough now. And Adam Wharton will probably be the likeliest bet because you take a look at the Crystal Palace team right now. I think it's fair to say that winning that FA Cup was probably the worst thing that could have happened to them because, all of the horrible things that have happened since then, being sort of dropped down to play in the Conference League rather than the Europa League where they should be playing, losing quite a few of their players, including a certain Ebrieze who is now at Arsenal. There's a lot of discontent right now. Oliver Glasner has made it clear that he'll be off at the end of the season. He could very well end up leaving before that, given the way things are going. And it's just falling apart so quickly, and several of their players will probably be in the shop window. And Wharton, being young, upcoming England international, he will certainly be one of those players. So it could very well be that the club will decide to make a move for him. And the prospects of him pairing up with Kobbie Mainoo.
Yeah.
Both of them, of course, mind you, were in the England squad for the Euro 2024 championships. And Mainoo in particular was a key part of our run to the final. I'd like to think that having both of those two playing in the same team would be wonderful news for England, definitely, and also for United.
Yeah.
And that is the sort of signing that you think will really excite them. So I'd like to cast judgment here and say that Tyler will be safe at Bournemouth for now. And as far as Baleba is concerned, he's an option, but I think they would like to go with Wharton, basically, especially if they can afford him. It does seem to be the case that English players are a little bit more overpriced, but Wharton is that sort of player, Craig, whose talent justifies, having that price tag put on him.
Yeah.
And especially when, Jordan Henderson retires from England duty after the World Cup, he will have a big role to play. Does he end up, getting into the England team a lot more easily with Declan Rice well ahead of him? I don't know, but, it will be an exciting prospect. And I think Wharton might be the more likely one to join him, to join United. And as far as Casemiro is concerned, I think it's fair to say that Real Madrid let him go to Manchester United at the right time because his powers were maybe starting to wane a little bit, but he was definitely, the type of person who wanted a new challenge, and he certainly took to playing to Manchester United like a duck to water. There was a point where, he was, his discipline wasn't exactly his best friend, and you can sort of tell that, I don't really have the stats for how many yellow cards and red cards he's incurred, but he has been sent off quite frequently, although that's the price you pay for being a central midfielder. He had Jim Ratcliffe saying some disgusting things about him, saying that he was one of those players who was on a big salary and effectively it was a waste of money. I'm sorry, but, that is no way to disrespect a guy like him who has won almost practically everything there is to win in the game. And, it's just disrespectful in many ways. And, of course, his contract is over. He's leaving on a free. I think he will play a big role for Carlo Ancelotti and the Brazil team. Of course, he and Ancelotti worked together at Real Madrid. And then he'll probably retire from international football and maybe play out the remaining years of his career back in his native Brazil maybe try and earn a Copa Libertadores back there. He's 33 though, so you'd like to think that he may have at least 1 or 2 more years left. But knowing him as well as I don't think that he would like to, continue playing if he doesn't have the belief that he can do it justice. And of course, as mentioned, he was a part of the United team that won 2 trophies under Erik ten Hag. Yeah. He will be a big. He's not going to be an easy person to replace, but I'm sure that United will definitely find a way, and he will be remembered as a fine player who probably didn't quite have the success he wanted at Manchester United, but at least he was able to. He didn't do too badly at Old Trafford. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there we are. I'm hoping, Manny, you're right. Tyler is not going to be going to Manchester United. Let's just cover quickly some other transfer news as well. And Charlotte FC are interested in Harvey Elliott. Charlotte FC coach Dean Smith has confirmed the MLS club's interest in Aston Villa midfielder Harvey Elliott as uncertainty continues to surround the England international short-term future. Sky Sports reports. Elliott joined Villa on loan from Liverpool last summer in a deal that included an obligation to buy if a set number of appearances were reached. However, the 22-year-old has featured just 5 times in all competitions, leaving that clause increasingly unlikely to be triggered. Smith suggested Charlotte could offer Elliott valuable game time ahead of the World Cup, with the midfielder currently on the fringes under Unai Emery. Earlier this month, Emery acknowledged that Villa had already decided against making a move permanent, citing doubts over committing significant funds to the transfer. Harvey Elliott's a good player. I don't understand this. Charlotte FC, no. Why would he go to the MLS at 22 years old?
The reason why, Craig, is there's not going to be a permanent deal. Under the rules of the Premiership, you will know very well that a player cannot play for more than 2 Premiership clubs in one season. I think he already made an appearance for Liverpool before being sent on loan to Villa. And the worst part is that both Liverpool and the former executive at Aston Villa in charge of player acquisitions, Monchi, I think his name was, they both conspired to do him dirty. You cannot in any way impose that sort of an obligation of having to buy him for that much money, after having played so few games. Now, Unai Emery is a tough manager to please, and I really do feel for this boy because I've seen enough of him at Fulham and Liverpool to know that he is a talented player, and obviously he was a very big part of our youth team's brilliant performance in the European Championships under Lee Carsley. There is a player in him, there's no doubt about it. It's just that he's not really able to fit into the system. And I think the one reason why Villa felt obliged to move in for him was because they weren't able to get the services of Paquetá from West Ham, and now he might be going back to Brazil. So it was a sort of panic buy. But from what Emery has seen from Elliott, I don't think he considers him to be the right fit for his system. Now, Elliott has said he doesn't want to go to America because I don't know if he'd be really happy with that sort of level. And it has to be, of course, as you know, in the Americas, it's a calendar year season. So it would be a different calendar year to the European League. So that move would work out well. But it could very well be that with Villa's squad now stretched so thin with so many injuries, they lost captain John McGinn in their rather disappointing home loss to Everton. But Jadon Sancho and Leon Bailey, coming back from Roma, I should say, played quite well in their impressive win over Newcastle United at St. James's Park earlier today, at Sir Eddie Howe's stomping ground. So again, it really remains to be seen if Elliott has a role to play. I don't think he has, but he was included in the squad today. And Emery has waxed lyrical about the boy, saying his professionalism is outstanding. You can't fault him. He's a really good lad, and he's been just caught in an unfortunate situation in many, many ways. He is still in his early 20s, so he's got many, many years ahead of him. But this thing will have to be resolved sooner or later. And there is a part of me that thinks that in the next few days, if Liverpool and Aston Villa do come to an understanding and remove some of the shackles around the deal, if they decide to, remove the obligation, make it an option, and increase the clause from 10 to maybe 15 games, because that's really as much as he can play right now, then maybe they wouldn't mind going in for him. They could consider him an option, because they had another player, Evan Gesson, who of course went to the AFCON with Ivory Coast. From what I've seen of him, Gesson, mate, he's not really the level either. And there's really nothing that Gesson does that Harvey Elliott can't do. But Elliott's just caught in a bit of a crossfire at the moment. So all I can say is that I hope that there will be a resolution in this window for all parties, especially the player, and how he can benefit. Because, it's sad to see him in this situation. But, if anyone has a right to be Mr. Glum or Mr. Grumpy, it's him. But he's still coming to training with a smile, leaving a good impression. He's doing everything he can do, and it's just horrible. And this is how PSR can be a real, pain in the rear end for clubs and players.
Yes, most definitely, most definitely. Well, there we are. That is with regards to Harvey Elliott. Very, very interesting potential move for him. Let's talk about Burnley now. And just before we do that, I just want to say hello to Tony from Hammers Football TV. Hope you're doing well, Tony, and good to see you on here. So, fringe players set to leave Burnley. Scott Parker has admitted that some of his Burnley players...
Let me just correct you. It's not Scott Parker. It's Scott the Bin Man Parker.
Scott the Bin Man Parker, sorry. Yes. Has admitted that some of his Burnley players are lacking game time, so he's going to bin them, including Oliver Son, could be allowed to leave the club in January. Sky Sports News had reported that Burnley had interest in fullback Son, as well as, I'm going to struggle saying this, Hjalmar Ekdal. And
Hjalmar Ekdal, that's fine.
Yeah. Quilinci Hartman, but would not be prepared to let anyone leave without finding a replacement first. It could do, maybe there could be an option there for Son. There could be an option for a few lack of game time, Parker said. Again, depending on the circumstances regarding us, we'll make a decision on who we feel can go for game time. Oliver is one that has done incredibly well. Of course, there has been lack of game time. That'll be a decision we will make. That was according to Sky Sports. And Scott Parker is using great use of the Queen's English like he did at AFC Bournemouth there. So there we go. Any comments on that? Burnley are fighting for their lives. I think that, it's likely that they will be relegated from the Premier League.
Yeah. Look, they've got some decent players in that side. Martin Dubravka, Kyle Walker, Lyle Foster, the South African international, Marcus Edwards is a former Tottenham loanee, and Jaden Anthony, of course, former Cherry, also is there in that squad. And Armando Broja, of course, quite talented, former Chelsea player, of course. Hannibal Mejri, former United player. Ashley Barnes and a few others. This is a squad that you wouldn't expect. This is a squad that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be in the hunt for European places, but you would expect them in many ways to at least do enough to stay in the league. And Barnes in particular is a Burnley legend. Now, I think in his 10th season with the club, he's played about 300 games for them, I think. Certainly had a long stint with Brighton and Hove Albion. And one of the players that was mentioned, of course, was this Peruvian chap named Oliver Son Christensen. Born in Denmark, but he plays for the Peruvian national team. And he's also definitely struggled for game time, I think. So it could very well be that he's allowed to leave. And obviously, for a club like Burnley, where they are now, they put in some really good performances. But I can't have sympathy for a team that is not really able to hold out long enough to be able to convert those losses into draws and draws into wins. And they should have beaten Tottenham Hotspur at, Turf Moor, but allowing them to get that last minute equaliser, I think, was just really, really, really poor. And players like Dubravka and Walker, with all their experience and quality, deserve a lot better than to be playing for this team at the moment. It's just sad in many ways to see Burnley the way they are. And if there is a case that some players could very well be allowed to leave, I suppose it'll probably be to at least temporarily lighten the wage bill, because, of course, the players who will be taking them on loan will also be financing at least partly paying some of their wages. Of course, the club will have to pay them as well. And it's just unfortunate in many ways. And I think if it is true that some of these players will end up leaving, then, good luck to them. You think of someone like Hartman, who started the season as the first choice left back, but has now been pretty much pushed out of the picture, I think. If some of those players will benefit from regular game time elsewhere, at least on loan, good luck to them. But, I think this could very well be the period when Burnley start to accept their fate, because they're so far behind even West Ham and Nottingham Forest in the league, and both Forest and West Ham won this weekend, that I really can't see them, picking up. And it's sad. They're just going to be like another Luton Town from last season. Luton Town won so many admirers, but they just weren't able to earn enough points, and they ended up going back down. And I think the same thing will happen with, Burnley. It's sad to see. And then some of these players actually who are still on the books might actually be better off playing for a new club. And if and when the club gets relegated, it'll have to be that some of these players will end up leaving.
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely. So there we are. That is about Burnley. I'm just going to go through some other quick rumours as well. So we'll just flash these up. Jean-Philippe Mateta has told Crystal Palace he wants to leave amid Aston Villa and Juventus interest in his services. So Mateta looks like he's going to be potentially on his way.
Yes.
So, yeah. Crystal Palace are in a right state at the moment. It's just come out of absolutely nowhere for them. Of course, Oliver Glasner is going to be leaving the club. Mark Gay's left. It's not particularly great timing. And Mateta, of course, wants to leave as well. And why I think Adam Wharton is probably going to be the most likely. And just a very, very quick one with regards to Aston Villa. Tammy Abraham is set to be confirmed by Villa in the next 24 hours. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Tammy Abraham, I quite like him. I think, he's a good player. But, what do you make of both of those? Can you see Mateta leaving to Juventus? I was actually watching, of course, Sky Sports News, the other day, and they were saying about Mateta and saying about, exactly what he's like. And apart from, recently, his career has been a fairly steady level. Of course, he's had a great season last year, and also the year before, but it's kind of gone down a little bit this year. Could you see him at Juventus?
The thing about Mateta is, obviously, he was a key player in Crystal Palace's wonderful season where they won the FA Cup. I think he literally destroyed Aston Villa in the semi-final. And he is also a highly sought-after international for France. I believe he was in their Olympic squad as they won the silver medal in the Paris Olympics, and he's been capped 3 times for France already. He doesn't have too bad returns as a striker, 40 goals in 124 league appearances, to go with the 6 from 29. He's not really necessarily a prolific striker, but he is quite big and muscular. And you won't necessarily expect him to be that type of striker who would, contribute with too many goals, but he will definitely, add some strength and muscle. And now a lot of Crystal Palace fans are trying to say, no, he ain't really all that. He had his most prolific seasons for Palace in 23-24, and of course, as I mentioned, 24-25. And of course, in the FA Cup, actually, he didn't really score any goals, but he was, of course, a big threat in the FA Cup. But he was reasonably prolific in the league. And, I'm not too sure that he would necessarily be the right fit for an Aston Villa side playing under Unai Emery. So it could very well be that they might end up, shelving that idea. And it might just work out well because with Tammy Abraham, now this chap, was at Aston Villa on loan from Chelsea, and he had an absolutely magnificent season. 37 appearances in the league, 25 goals as Villa secured promotion back to the Premiership. Sadly, he had to return to Chelsea. And of course, with Chelsea, he was a part of the squad that won the Champions League and the Super Cup under Tommy Tuchel. Also won the Conference League with AS Roma under Jose Mourinho. So surprisingly, he has quite a few trophies in his cabinet already. Also capped 11 times by England, still only 28 years old. And there's a lot of promise in him because there's that emotional quotient with Abraham coming back to the club, having played such a big role in helping Villa get back among the big time after those horrible years where they were, in the Championship and losing a lot of hope. And I'm glad that Aston Villa are back. And it could very well be that, after spending so long in exile in Italy without any real hope of being, picked or considered by any England bosses, coming back to England is probably the best deal for him. So if Tammy Abraham comes back, I don't think Villa will look for Mateta. Now, it could be, mind you, that they may decide to sell Ollie Watkins and free up funds for Mateta if they really want. But again, we're going to have to see how that happens. I think now the loan deal for Abraham makes a lot of sense. He's returning to a club where he is still loved and adored and where he has great memories.
Yeah.
And of course, he was signed permanently by Besiktas in 2026, but hasn't made a single league appearance. So this is a good move for him. And if he does start to score well, there's no reason why he can't eventually get back into the England reckoning. Although, the case with England is simple. We have one confirmed starter in Harry Kane. We've got several other strikers who are doing very well. Danny Welbeck comes to mind.
Yes.
So I think this is a really Abraham will prove to be a masterstroke for Aston Villa, and it could see him scoring the goals that Villa needs to continue maintaining their push for the league and the Europa League and also the FA Cup, and they could still have a magnificent season because they are still hot on our tails. As far as Mateta, I don't know if any Premier League club would want him. He could try his luck in Italy. Juventus would be a decent option. I think Lloyd Kelly is still there, former Cherry, as you know. So, I think here Mateta might just have to wait until the end of the season and then he can break away free. But maybe he'll realise that the grass isn't always greener on the other side.
Most definitely. Well, we're just going to go through a couple of rumour mills. Matt has kindly done these for us, and I have found also another one, which is quite interesting whilst we've been talking as well. So let's go through the ones that Matt has done firstly. So the rumour mill, the future of the 24-year-old Brazilian Luis Enrique at Inter is considered uncertain. Besiktas has reportedly shown interest in the player, and Bournemouth from the Premier League is also tracking him. To be honest, this kind of ties in to the one I've just seen. 24-year-old Luis Enrique. I'm just going to have a quick look at him because, of course, Inter Milan, Brazilian again. It seems like we're really scouting in that area of the world. because the other player that I've just noticed as well, the rumour that is just circulating, it seems to have come out whilst we've been on tonight. Luis Enrique, 24 years of age, started at Botafogo, went to Marseille, went back to Botafogo on loan, and he's at Inter Milan. Yeah, he's got quite a good history, but he's going to cost quite a bit, I think. This one. What do you make of him?
He could. Obviously, I know this boy played against Arsenal in the Champions League earlier this week, and he does seem a decent prospect, but clearly he's also struggling for a bit of game time. He's already made 17 appearances in the league, so for Milan, so he shouldn't really have any real problems. I think the only reason why, and he signed a 5-year contract having joined in 2025, so I'm not too sure why there should be any kind of uncertainties over his future. Maybe he wants more game time at the age of 24. Maybe some other clubs, as you mentioned, will be interested in him.
Yeah.
With Besiktas set, I think the thing which I can think of is that with Besiktas set to lose Tammy Abraham, Enrique can just slot right in, and that will probably, soften the blow a little bit. But I'm a bit Inter Milan, of course. If you take a look at them right now, they are, as we speak, top of the Serie A at the moment, and 5 points ahead of AC. So. And Enrique's played 17 of the 22 league games I've already played this season, so I really don't know why his future would be under threat. Maybe the coach, Christian Chivu, doesn't necessarily rate him, or maybe he's getting impatient.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that maybe he'll end up staying at Inter and moving on at the end of the season. But, there is, of course, this article from OneFootball where he's blasted his coach's treatment of him. He was, of course, substituted after 33 minutes. And,
Is this really the sort of attitude we want at AFC Bournemouth? Somebody who's blasting their coaches. It's an interesting one. Right sort of age. Going to cost quite a bit, no doubt. I think that this is probably quite unlikely. So there we are. That is Luis Enrique. Let's go to.
Wait a minute. I've read that wrong. Apparently, It was the coach's decision to bring him off after 33 minutes when they played against a lowly placed Serie A team, and when the coach was asked about his decision to replace the Brazilian after 33 minutes with the team 2-0 down. He said he wanted to protect Enrique, saying that the treatment he's received from some fans and media outlets has not been fair. And so it could very well be that maybe Enrique just isn't willing to continue accepting some of the criticism, and maybe a less hostile environment might be the best thing for him. So maybe there is some truth to that, but I'm not too sure a move to Bournemouth would be the best thing. Having said that, though, if he goes to Turkey with their strict demands on their players, he's going to find it even more difficult. And given that you've already acquired Rayan, I'm not too sure he'd have much of a role to play. And hopefully there'll be a resolution for him, because he doesn't deserve to be, hounded like this.
It seems like we're targeting the wings, but again, where I think, we've got Brooks, we've got Tavernier there. Of course, Justin Kluivert can play out there. Of course, Semenyo, we've lost him. Rayan can play there. If that is going to happen, maybe Iriola is looking for a little bit more on that side. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But let's have a look at the next rumour mill along. And it says Bournemouth is interested in signing Roma's goalkeeper Mael Silva, according to the Gazzetta dello Sport. And the transfer could cost 70 million euros, according to Goal. Mael Silva, as everybody will remember, was linked in the summer. Maybe it's somebody that Andoni Iriola is interested in. €70 million. I cannot see it in the slightest. And like we said, you know, with regards to the other goalkeeper being linked, you know, I'd like to see Will Dennis. I'd like to see, you know, of course, Fraser Forster's coming. He's not going to be very happy if Mark Silva comes in for €70 million. I'm sure Jordi Petrovic isn't going to be pleased. Alex Paulson, you know, what's he going to do? You know, he's probably kicking himself that he's come here. I think this is rubbish.
Absolute rubbish. Or, as our friend would say,
yes, I shall get it to. Cole is here.
Bullshit.
Yes. Miles Silva, it is.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
The thing is, you had Kepa Arrizabalaga on your books. Now he's on our books. Yeah. Chelsea paid a whopping 71 million quid for this fella, and he flattered to deceive during his time there. He has won a couple of Champions League medals, but they were both as a backup goalkeeper. He hasn't really set trees alight. And it's like the more you tend to pay for goalkeepers, the more disappointing they turn out to be. Now, this chap Svilar has, of course, been Roma's first choice keeper for quite some time. He pushed the former Portuguese legend Rui Patricio out of the first team picture before he ended up leaving, and he is still playing. He's got the Italian international Pierluigi Golini as a backup.
Yeah.
But when you take a look at his entire career and the honours that he has, it doesn't necessarily make for some very good reading. And he was a Premier Liga winner with Benfica back in 2018, 2019. And that was when he sort of came to prominence when he was much younger that time.
Yeah.
And was in the Europa League team of the season 2 years back when, I think, if memory serves me right, Roma were beaten in the final by Sevilla, I think it was. Yep.
Yes.
But he hasn't really won too many big awards. And he's only received one cap for Serbia, although that...
of course, Jordan
and I think
is our, Serbian number one. I think
it's
rubbish. I think it's absolute rubbish.
Absolute rubbish.
Really
Rubbish.
Absolute rubbish, this one.
Yeah. Or as Kyle would say, bovine manure. Let's move on from this. Let's move on from this.
Definitely. Let's go to rumour mill number 3, and they've got a fourth one. That one hasn't got an image at this moment in time, but maybe Matt is in the background making that image. We'll see. And the next rumour is Bournemouth have submitted an official offer of €28 million to Trabzonspor for Arseny Batagov, which is an increase on a previous offer of €4 million plus a mandatory purchase option of €20 million, according to the English press. And Bournemouth is showing persistent interest in the transfer of Batagov. I don't know much about this guy. Any ideas?
I've got the Wikipedia page lined up for you, my friend.
Lovely.
Of like, he's 23 years old. He's more of a centre back. And I think he's been at Trabzonspor now for about 2 seasons, I think. Made 32 appearances. Quite prominent as a Ukraine youth international, having been capped 50 times across 5 different age groups, but hasn't really been called up for the senior team yet. He was, of course, a part of the Ukraine Olympic squad in the Paris Olympics, of course. And he seems to be a very, very young prospect with not too much known about him. And to be brutally honest, there's nothing really much about him that would suggest that he would be a perfect fit. And the thing about these centre-backs, especially if you want to bring them into the Premier League, they've got to have a little bit about them in terms of, that experience and that gravitas, if you will. I remember back in the day, at the turn of the millennium, we signed this Latvian bloke by the name of Igor Stepanovs. Now, he made a name for himself at Skonto Riga, having played there for a combined 7 seasons and rocking up over 150 official appearances. But when he came to Arsenal, his first season was a big disappointment. And in the second season, he did actually recover a little bit, but he never really got going with us. And this was a chap that when he joined Arsenal had already been capped several times by Latvia and went on to be a big part of their Euro 2004 team and also earn 100 caps. But not too many Arsenal fans will remember him with fondness, although I do remember that in 2001-2002, he made 6 appearances and played an important role, filling in for us at left back when we had a crisis there with the likes of Ashley Cole and Silvino being injured. Yeah. He wasn't able to earn a Premiership medal. I'd like to think that maybe he would have been given one through special dispensation. We might have to see. But, so if he was able to struggle there with the level, if he struggled in the Premier League with all of the experience that he had, Stepanov's, there's nothing to suggest that this chap Batagov won't find it difficult. And I'm sorry, but when it comes to defenders, you might want someone to be a little bit really more experienced. Of course, Dean Huijsen might have been a bit of an outlier because, he was, when he came in, obviously he's 20 years old, obviously. He had one season with Bournemouth where he did some really good things. He did have some game time at Roma before, and Juventus, of course, in Serie A before coming over to Bournemouth. And now he's at Real Madrid. But again, these players are called outliers for a reason. And Batagov's career has been more or less nondescript, to say the very least. Back with some clubs in his native Ukraine, now in Turkey with Trabzonspor, which has had its share of decent players playing for them in the past, including ex-Arsenal legend Kevin Campbell, Lord rest his soul. I just don't think there's really much in this. I don't think he's really an option at this point.
No, I've got to agree with you. I think, it's a high fee for a player coming from Turkey. You never know. It could well be very, very good scouting, but I think that this is rubbish. And James Hill got to be given his chance. Milosakovic, I think, is really, really good backup. Diakite, I'm sure he'll get his confidence back and be part of it. Senesi, of course, he's going to be potentially. Well, I know he wants to leave, but I think I can't see this happening. I could see a defender coming in, central defender, but I don't think it's going to be this guy. But you never know. And like I say, there is one other rumour and a link that has been made since we've been on air. This has been surfacing on the lovely place, which is Twitter X. And this is for an Ian Subiabre. How do you say that?
Subiabre.
Manny, I'm going to have to learn that one if this guy signs. Subiabre.
Yeah.
There we are. Do you know much about him? Because looking and just doing a bit more research and a bit of Googling, he looks like he was on Barcelona's books. There is a 30 million euro release clause with River Plate, but Barcelona didn't activate that. This is according to Football España. He hasn't played many games, in all honesty. He's only played 16 games. He's scored 2 goals for River Plate, so he's very, very fresh. He is only 19 years old. The interesting bit in all this is, of course, in Argentine international. Is it possible that this man, because he plays mainly on the left-hand side as a winger, will be a long-term plan link up with Julio Soler? To be honest, that's the first thing that's jumped out to me because how much do you know about Subiabre?
Well, I can tell you right now that his father was a former professional footballer back in Argentina. Martin Subiabre played for CAI, where Ian actually did spend part of his youth career. In fact, So his youth career has been sort of split between CAI and River Plate. He is, of course, now a part of the River Plate senior team, which currently has a large number of, players, including, current internationals, Gonzalo Montiel, a part of that World Cup winning squad, Germain Pizzella, and, of course, the captain Franco Armani. Marcos Acuna is also another one. So it's interesting to see that he has been given some chances and he has been, used more as a winger. And he describes himself as actually more of a powerful striker and scorer. Very small for his age, about 5'7", so the same height as someone like a Harvey Elliott, for instance. And even also Eddie Buendia, who has literally been balling for Aston Villa this season, also an Argentinian. He's a youth international for 2 countries, played 1 game for Chile under-17 and 20 games for the Argentina under-17 team, scoring 3 goals. And he was a part of their under-17 World Cup campaign in 2023. So he's definitely one for the future, but he is still a little bit, he's very, very raw, I would say.
Yeah.
Only 16 appearances in 3 seasons at River Plate. So, and 2 goals, it has to be said, 16 league appearances and 2 league goals. So there is a lot of room for him to develop. There is a great deal of potential for him. But he hasn't really played as much as someone like a Rayan has before you acquired him. And so he will probably be one who will be asked to, continue playing in South America and maybe after 1 or 2 years make the move to Europe. So there is a lot to like about this chap. And I'll tell you what, he's another player who could very well end up being a part of Argentina's cycle for the 2030 World Cup because, after 2026, I think a lot of their players will definitely retire. Definitely Lionel Messi. I think we will see the last of the likes of Nicolas Otamendi, Paulo Dybala. Many members of that 2002 vintage will be gone. So this chap Subiabre, if he's good enough, could very well end up being a part of that new cycle for 2030. Regardless of whether Lionel Scaloni remains as Argentina coach. So he's one for the future, but the distant future. Let's just put it that way.
I can't be honest, this excites me as well. And, firstly, 30 million euros for a player of this age who's played this little. Again, like with Rayan, it is a little bit concerning because who knows if Rayan is going to be able to make the transition. But, we've got to trust Andoni, we've got to trust Frano, we've got to trust Thiago Pinto. If this rumour has got legs behind it, and I think the link up, with Julio Soler on that left-hand side, that's what the only reason why I'm thinking this actually makes sense, because Julio Soler's not ready. He's not ready. He's a very similar age to Subiabre. Maybe they're seeing these two as potentially the future, but to spend 30 million euros on a player now that is going to be a prospect for the future, I think that concerns me a little bit more than this move for Rayan that we're making.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And, I think at first glance this move would make sense because Soler is also Argentinian. And he was also, I would think, I don't think he's actually played with Subiabre on any underage teams. He might have possibly played. But, it's still far too young, far too soon. And how many more young players are you willing to get, especially if you could be resigned to the prospect of losing Marcos Senesi at the end of the season? I'm not too sure having too many youngsters will be the best way to go. And there are still doubts as to whether Adam Smith, among others, will be there. You know, there's a saying that if you want to have a farm, you need to have some old roosters and some young buffaloes. You can't have too many young buffaloes and so few old roosters, and vice versa. So, look, Subri Abre, I'm just watching a reel of him right now on Twitter as we speak, and he definitely looks, very promising. But again, as you said perfectly, spending that much money for someone that young who hasn't played as often as one would like for his club, I just don't think it's the right deal. But do keep tabs on him. Do keep tabs on him. He is someone who can be, looked at for the future.
Who knows? Who knows? Maybe Frano and Thiago are working their magic, because remember, Rayan had this ridiculous clause in his contract, and they managed to find a way around that. Maybe there's the same with this guy as well, but who knows? I think, Manny, we've covered absolutely everything today. Of course, next week is the closure of the transfer window. How many more deals do you think are due to happen?
That's not really a question worth asking. You know that there are many, many clubs who will want to get some last-minute deals over the line. They're going to be wheeling and dealing and doing everything they can. I'm just glad that, we might not be doing a live enter the transfer window, because that would be just, completely hectic. But all I can say is that don't be surprised if you find a huge deluge of deals being done on the last 2 days of the window. So it's going to be exciting.
There we are. There we are. So if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever, do head over to the YouTube channel to have your comments. Again, hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell button below. Manny, you'll be here for that day, won't you? The transfer deadline.
Yes, I will be. I will be. And I've also received a message from Mr. Harrison. This coming Wednesday will be the 100th episode of Cherry Picking.
Yes. Yes, it will be. We are going to be doing the recording. So, yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed, you can join us for that.
No need for fingers crossed, mate. I am there.
You're there.
I love the cherry picking shows. I've missed them, and I can't wait to be back for them, if possible.
Definitely, mate. Well, you will see us very, very soon. I'll see Manny beforehand, and then you'll see him very shortly after as well on Cherry Picking. But we will see you for the final transfer show of the season. Of course, during the summer, it'll be next season's ones. So hit like, hit subscribe, hit the bell button below, and we shall see you in the next one. Up the cherries, up the gunners as well. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us.
TalkSport Fan Network.
The ultimate on-demand destination for the UK's best fan-led football podcasts.
Want authentic supporter insight on all things Bournemouth? Follow Up the Cherries in all departments on the TalkSport Fan Network.
Club-dedicated content created by the fans, for the fans.
Search TalkSport Fan Network.
I should be like you, Mel.